sounds, but right now. Mm-hmm. We're missing the star of the show. Is this a cold or allergies?
It's a mixture. When I get a cold, it becomes allergy, it becomes asthma, it becomes a mixture.
Oh, yeah, that's a lot of fun. Huh? The snowball effect.
Yes.
Oh, you're spoiled. Hello.
Hello. We are recording already. We are on air.
We're on already?
Yeah.
Namaste. So,
Yeah, did you hook up your thing?
good. Testing. How about now? Testing?
No.
No?
Maybe it's me. Yeah, that's right.
Oh, that helps. Testing?
Has a
Good
weird,
now?
has a weird sound.
Testing? Testing?
Put it away from you.
Testing? Testing?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay.
The sound is not working.
Excuse us, we have to fix the sound for a moment.
Can we change channels and see if that
I'm sorry?
helps? Can we change channels here
Sure.
and see if that helps? And pull
I'm
this.
on A. No?
Pull this in. You're at A, okay. No, go back to B.
Did you listen to it at A?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
did.
B. I'm on B. Testing.
I don't know what to do.
The good thing about all this is that the
That's
heart never runs away from us. And we can always just hang out there while everything else just happens the way it has to happen.
That's better.
It's better? Yeah? Good. So, do we have permission to start? Great. Okay. So, I've been asked to come up with a more, well, precise perhaps is the word, description of heart sourcing. And what I want to do today is to take us a step further. We've done heart sourcing by focusing into the cave of the heart with the use of images, use the point of light, the sun, you know. And that's extremely valuable because when we do this as an exercise, we can then absorb into us the radiance of the heart. And it heals us and it makes us further capable of opening. And we come to understand that this opening to love in our own heart is completely safe, that we cannot possibly be hurt in this process. That's very important because we have deep-seated fears from having been hurt in love or betrayed or left behind, or even when we were very little, when we needed mommy to come and she was busy and she couldn't come. You know, that's how it starts. And so we often have this sense that we don't trust love, that it's not safe to open up, right? But then, of course, when you just open up within yourself to that source within you, it becomes very clear that you're just moving around the very possibility of being hurt. And that the only way you can get hurt is by staying closed to that source of love in you. But so from that still very important way of working with the heart, I'm going to take a step further today to the heart sourcing meditation that is really just about entering that space of the heart. So how do we do that? Considering that the mind is connected with the senses, and the senses by their very nature are moving outward. And so the mind is conditioned to always pay attention to the outer world. And what we're doing here, or what our task is, to come inside, to reverse that outgoing flow of the mind and create a peaceful inward turning flow of the mind. And Durga has asked me to come up with a more precise description of this. So the beautiful thing is this sort of thing happens over breakfast, and then I sit down after breakfast and there is a description just sort of flowing out onto paper without any effort. So I thought to share this with you today because when we write something down, it gets a little bit more crystallized than speaking off the cuff like this. And I'm not going to get much into how we're doing this because that's been the subject of our discussions in the past, how we use a mantra. But just very quickly, when you have a potent mantra, like first what mantra to use. If you have a devotion to a divine being, like Jesus or Krishna or Shiva, that is the ticket. If that devotion, the stronger that devotion is, the more meaningful the name of that being will be for you, or a short phrase concerning that being. So for me, it's Ram. Ram is not very much known in the Western world as a being, unless you're familiar with the Ramayana, the great scripture of India. But it's a potent name or a potent mantra for people also who don't have a specific being that they relate to. Maybe you don't have a sense of devotion toward a sacred being, and this is true for most people really in Western society now. So you can use a word like this, which has both a mantric power and a whole story attached of this divine incarnation who came to this plane and fought the demons and so on, which of course is a metaphor for us. This is what goes on inside of us. And those interpretation of these scriptures that really bring it home to us that Rama is us, Krishna is us, Jesus is living alive inside of us now. That is, to me, the most valuable way to understand the scriptures. So when you have a relationship, or you just pick a name, pick a mantra. These mantras, the Eastern ones, were given to us by ancient sages who were fully aware of their mantric power. And then they were further empowered by the use of millions of people over thousands of years. It's very potent. And if you use, I'm going to use the word Ram, if you use that type of mantra, it's actually the essence of the heart itself. You're evoking that essence by using the sound. So I said I wasn't going to talk much about mantra. There you have it. What do I know what's going on? Try to figure out the future. It's a hopeless enterprise. So we begin by bringing our focus into the universal heart, the Hridayam, supported by mantra and breath. So breath is also very potent, to breathe in and out of the heart. Why? Because it brings your attention, it gives your attention something to actually focus on. You can imagine that the breath streams in and out of the heart and creates a sensation of touch. Right here in the center of the heart, of the chest, similar to the sensation of touch in your nostrils, which you will be familiar with if you've done any meditating. Subtle sensation of touch, and you can feel that, imagine you feel that in the heart, and it gives your attention something to focus on. Our aim with heart sourcing yoga is to experience the peace and unconditional love of the spiritual heart. It begins as a distinct experience that can range in intensity from hardly perceptible to enormous and unforgettable. But no matter its intensity, it is an experience that contrasts with our usual state of mental distractedness and emotional stress. It's very different from that. Whether as a trickle or a powerful stream, from the deep heart arises a profound healing and nurturing, which enables us to open more deeply to love. Love itself opens us to love. This is the essence of wisdom. From the beginning, this love, this inner relaxation, must take the form of self-love, which frees us from the pain of self-criticism, self-rejection, and self-hate. And here is the big difference between the ancient people of India and us modern people. The people for whom these yogic techniques were first created did not have that kind of self-criticism, self-rejection, and self-hate. We have it, and it can be a formidable screen for us to, we can use all these techniques, but as long as we're not really open and attuned with ourselves, those techniques will have a real difficult time taking hold in us. So that's why this particular approach to the heart, to counteract this self-rejection, is so important, at least as a component in someone's yoga. It can be mixed with devotion to a great being in whom we see the divine reflected perfectly. Such devotion is powerful. It helps us transcend our egocentric way of life. When devotional love finds its fulfillment, it becomes supreme, complete, untainted, unconditional, and timeless. We discover that our devotion, as all the love we have experienced in the past, has its source and fulfillment in the cave of the heart. So the presence of the beloved, whether that was Jesus or Buddha or Krishna or whoever, is discovered right here inside of us, as us. Some people who adhere to the old-time religion will fight you vigorously on that. But we don't have to respond. As the mind begins to become still, we experience gaps between our thoughts. We may begin to sense a soft comfort in the heart. It is a sensation of calmness, an inner peace followed by a fullness in the heart. Thoughts take a rest, along with our focus on outer reality, and our capacity for perception is rejuvenated. So now, this is, in a sense, the progression of a meditative experience in the heart. First, in isolated moments, and soon with greater regularity, there's a sense of effortless fulfillment, an absence of desire that leads to the recognition that in the heart space, all desires are fulfilled. Fear, anxiety, and worry cannot be found. Although waves of thought still occur and distract us from the focus on the heart, these waves become more subtle and less disturbing with continued practice. When the mind stirs into activity, it is quickly pacified again in the gentle embrace of the heart. Attention is drawn into the bliss-permeated inner space. Our sensitivity to peaceful perceptiveness, empty of distraction, a deep rest, becomes honed and deepens. We gain a direct experience of desireless love, which is of the essence of pure contentment and beauty, and is fulfilled in its own bliss. This love is recognized not as an experience, but as our core identity. It is identical with wisdom. This completely fulfilled love and intuitive intelligence, the wisdom mind, are twin expressions of the self and the heart. Here, consciousness is bathed in unchanging joy, without sorrow, and illuminated by its own inner light. Let me read this one again. Here, consciousness is bathed in unchanging joy, without sorrow, and illuminated by its own inner light. This state is highly attractive to the mind, and with progressive practice, heart-sourcing meditation becomes effortless and increasingly permanent. It doesn't become something you do on your meditative cushion alone. It spreads into your life. Negative impulses melt away. A new inner freedom is found and an alignment with our true nature. This true nature of loving wisdom is discovered to be the nature of all things, animate and inanimate. We notice that we exist in a limitless ocean of love. This intuition comes first in glimpses, but soon it becomes increasingly stable. It It permeates all the apparent dualities and conflicts of existence. Peace becomes unshakable as our true identity is discovered beyond the influence of the world. It is the conscious and blissful core of being that contains all space and time. To be continued. It's probably true for most of us, if not all of us, that most of the time our minds are not busy dealing with that type of subtlety of experience. And yet we all yearn for it. Every being yearns for the profound happiness that love is.
I have a two-parter question.
Yeah.
First of all, what is the difference between our mind and our brain? And do we need our mind if we're living from our heart? That's one. The second is, should we, if we do, and there is a mind that we're dealing with here, do we bring our heart to our mind or our mind to our heart? You want me to ask one at a time again?
That's one at a time. Yeah.
Okay.
That way I can be
Okay.
sure, hopefully, to respond to it exactly.
The difference between our mind and our brain?
Yeah, right. So I would go with the term consciousness, or we can use the term mind. So in different traditions, the mind is divided into different parts so we can understand it better. In the Western psychological tradition, we have the conscious mind and the unconscious mind, and we have other divisions also, right? In India, you have a fourfold division, and the important parts right now are, there is Chitta, which is sort of the mind that we usually think about when we talk about the thinking mind, and everything that's in that. But then there's also Buddhi, and Buddhi is intelligence. It's the faculty of the mind. See, animals have a chitta, have a mind. They can think, they can recognize something, they can function like that, mammals particularly. But they do not, as far as we know, have this intelligence, the ability to interpret and to gain wisdom, to, perhaps, for instance, the mind looking at itself. So I like to use this simpler division rather than looking at four different parts. And I speak of the thinking mind and the wisdom mind, or intuition, intuitive intelligence, right? So intuitive intelligence is the higher octave of the same mind. The lower octave is our thinking procedure, right? The thinking procedure certainly uses the hardware of the brain. And when there's problems with the brain, we can see that in the thinking, in our thinking and our ability to process thought and express it.
Does that all emanate from the heart center, though? Is it all one and the same?
Well, we can say this, that the thinking mind, we generally locate in the brain, right? But the intelligence itself is a much more subtle entity, and that, if we need to locate it anywhere at all, we would locate that in the heart. And that brings us also back to people in pre-rational cultures who generally, when they say that they're thinking something, they point to the heart. We point to the head. So the rational mind seems to be more focused here.
And the wisdom mind is here.
The heart, I personally, and this serves us in heart sourcing because, of course, we are trying to get out of the ego-dominated thinking process into a much more relaxed, heart-centered state, which is here. which has two aspects. And one is wisdom, the other one is that sense of compassion and love. So, since you asked, don't forget your other questions, but I have this here and I wanted to talk about it too. I found a wonderful text that really completely is aligned with heart sourcing in Pandit Tigranet's rendering of the secret of the Yoga Sutra. The Yoga Sutra is, of course, the primary scripture of yoga, created or discovered by Patanjali about 2,200 years ago, and then written about by countless other sages in terms of commentaries, because it's very terse. And I discovered in his particular commentary a real treasure for us when we're talking about heart sourcing. And he also takes recourse to a commentary by Vyasa. Vyasa and Patanjali are these ancient sages. What is an ancient sage? It's sort of like we don't have quite a way of relating to this. What we have in the Christian culture are these energies that are called archangels. So the highest of the angels. What is that? It's a stream of consciousness, and there's several, but they're sort of consciousnesses that are very high, profound states of wisdom and love. And out of these, or let me say, these streams of consciousness then manifest as beings. It can manifest as a vision of an angel in the Christian realm. And it can manifest as a sage in India. Have been known, these great beings have been known to manifest on this earth plane for thousands of years whenever their presence is needed. So these two beings, Patanjali and Vyasa, he is combining their commentaries on this text. And the stanza 136, he translates like this: by concentrating on the lotus of the heart. I usually don't use the word lotus because it can be misleading, and then we think it has to do with the chakras, but it doesn't. We're really talking about the same thing. I call it the cave of the heart. So he writes, by concentrating on the lotus of the heart, there arises a sorrowless joy, which is infused with inner light. Upon its emergence, such a state anchors the mind to a peaceful flow, free from all thought constructs. So what this means is that we have these two aspects arising. Sorrowless joy. That's the sense of love, the sense of bliss in the heart. Now it becomes compassion, it becomes devotional love, it becomes all kinds of different loves. It becomes certainly this recognition of love as our own source inside of us. And then we have this inner luminosity. That's the wisdom aspect. So here we have these two, the wisdom, the higher intelligence, the intuitive mind, and the ability to love, this great bliss and joy that we experience here. And it's a desireless love. Now, when we think love in our Western tradition, we usually immediately connect with something we desire. But it's beyond all desire. So it doesn't have that emotional grip on you that we usually associate with love. Just like, oh, I gotta have this, I gotta have that. No, it's much cleaner. It's just a state of being, of sorrowless joy, not touched by anything painful at all. Right? And then he goes into in-depth explanations of both the sorrowless joy and the inner luminosity. So now you have more questions that I haven't answered yet.
A couple more just on that. Does this all emanate from the heart cave, or is the sorrowless joy in the heart cave and the wisdom mind in the head?
Okay. When you understand the cave of the heart,
Mm-hmm.
and you know that on one hand we can say it's the seat of the soul, right? Now there's a particular thing about the soul. The soul has the ability to identify itself with the world. Then we experience ourselves as a separate personality within this dual universe, all the dualities of the world, right? Or the soul can identify itself with its own essence, which is it can look inward, right? When it looks inward, the soul in India is called Atma, right? Focus it outward in the world, it becomes Jivatma, the individual soul, housed in a body and personality. When it looks inward, it sees that it is one with the ultimate, and it becomes Paramatma, the ultimate Atma, the world soul. That creates this appearance. So because when the soul identifies with the world, it goes into illusion. It goes away from truth. When it identifies with the self in the cave of the heart, it goes into truth. And the truth is that that creative power that creates this universe and every moment anew is exactly situated here. Or let me say it this way, this is the passageway to that understanding. It is of course not situated anywhere because it's everywhere. It's also beyond everywhere. So this space in the heart ultimately is the space within which all time and space manifests.
The last question.
Go ahead.
Do we dissolve the mind into the heart, or do we spread the nectar of the heart to the mind?
Well, in a sense, it's both ways. Our thinking becomes increasingly permeated by the wisdom and the love of the heart as we experience that. So you notice that the fabric of your thinking changes, and with that your emotional world and your behavior and your relationships and your physical body changes. This doesn't go overnight, because especially changes in the physical body take a while. Well, they usually take a while. They don't always have to take a while. So there's certain, exceptions to these things. Lost my train of thought.
The nectar of the heart going into
Yeah.
the mind, and the mind
So,
going into the heart.
in a way, this essence of the heart permeates our thinking, permeates our experience of the world. When I was just sitting with Ramdas, he said often, and I totally get what he's saying, it's like, you look around and you love the walls.
Mm.
You love the plants, you love the sky, you love the air you breathe, you love everything, you love the couch. Love is in and with everything. And so nothing is separate from that. And with that increasing recognition, we can say, and this is all metaphorical, it's all a matter of a figure of speech, that the mind, the thinking mind, dissolves into the heart. Because the thinking mind doesn't stay the same. But we always still, this was your other question, we always still have the thinking mind at our disposal, should it be needed. So what happens is your state of mind more and more becomes just clear. I was going to say simple, which is certainly true, but then we think simple is stupid, right? Not stupid at all. just extremely peaceful and still, and being present without the need of the mind the way it usually is, of thinking always about something, always like a dog with a bone, not letting go of something to think about, right? So then through discovering these breaks in our thoughts and expanding that and letting the warmth and the essence and the luminosity of the heart and the joy of the heart stream into that, we realized, hey, I can be really comfortable not thinking at all. And at first that may be disquieting because we're not used to that. We're not used to this much peace. We're used to being somebody, damn it. Right? But then, before long we become used to it. And we can just sort of relax. This is when the mind dissolves into the heart, right? And the deeper that goes, the more you get a real grasp on what is meant by this whole business about enlightenment. So then what happens is that the entity that you thought you were, like this I business that, I'm this, I'm better than them, I'm worse than these, and all of this, and this is my future, this is my past, this is what I can do. All of this process just slows down. It dissolves. It becomes transparent. And with it, it goes away. And you begin to live in this inner joy. And when speech is needed, it speaks. When thought is needed, they appear. And you don't have to say, I'm thinking this, I'm saying this, I'm doing that. It just appears. And who you are is revealed as that consciousness that watches this, in my case, Ramgiri puppet. In your case, the Leslie puppet. Right? Moving through life perfectly at ease and amazingly knowing how to respond best to each situation. So that's sort of the preview exercise, right? Now, how do we get there? We get there by recognizing that every time a gross impurity or a distractedness or a false identification arises, this is our work. So what are these? Gross impurities are emotions like anger, fear, hatred, guilt, shame, etc. Right? So when they come up, there's our work. What is distractedness? Distractedness is, the mind that can do two things. One is just being unsettled, always looking for something to pick on, right? This kind of basic sense of anxiety and worry, future oriented. So we'll be safe. You need to figure out the future, but you figure out the future according to how you interpret the past. And the past was problematic, so your future is going to be seen as problematic. Of course, both of those aren't real, because one is gone, the other one hasn't happened yet, right? But this is the mind that is involved in this and is not settled, right? So this is distracted mind. And part of that is, of course, our identification with certain thoughts, with many thoughts that we can question. So there's the two antidotes of, first the antidote of open attention, then the antidote of the work, the antidote of meditation, of finding stillness. And then finally, we have the veil of false identification. This is the ahamkara, the I-making facility, that part of the mind that constantly looks at its experience and makes an I out of it. I'm the one who's talking. I'm the one who's listening. I'm the one who's thinking. I'm the one who's doing. I'm the one who is this tall, this old, this educated, this stupid, this smart, this good, this bad. This constant stream of having to identify. I mean, how much work it is. But we don't know how to stop it. And it has this inbuilt sense of, oh, I got to continue, because if I am not real to myself, then my God, this will be just total disaster, right? So it's afraid of its own death. The illusion is afraid of its own death. And so it neurotically keeps itself up. That process does not exist in the heart. And we all have that heart that is already free of it. So that's why it's such a relief to come here. And it's a funny mix, because we use a certain amount of focus, so there's some willpower involved to bring the mind into the heart. But then as we get that sense, there must be this just letting go into the heart, because being in the heart is in itself effortless. So we cannot really bring the effort into the heart. It can take us to the heart, but then we have to just relax. And it doesn't happen overnight, so it's a matter of going back and forth. As my friend Mirabai Starr says, drop into the heart again and again and again. So what we do with the purposeful, what we call disciplinary meditation on the heart, as opposed to natural meditation, which is a natural state, effortless. First, we have to have the disciplinary meditation, which is the way of purposefully going into the heart, bringing the attention there again and again. And this goes right out into our world. It's like when you have a conflict with the world, with your relationships, with somebody or something that happened. Drop into the heart, drop into the heart, drop into the heart. And that means, this is not easy always, because we have a death grip on our gripes and complaints. And we believe our thoughts, our stressful thoughts. And this is a wonderful pointer that comes from Byron Katie, is that whenever a thought is stressful and creates negative emotions, it tells us that it's not true to who we are. Because who we are is effortless, it's sorrowless joy and inner luminosity, that with some practice we can see everywhere and live in this ocean of love. So that's the practice. You have a problem with somebody, you come into that inner space, and then you look at you don't deny them, you don't brush them away, you don't escape from them, you don't repress them. But from that place of the heart, you look at your stressful thoughts or your negative emotions about this person. And then what happens? Suddenly they appear a lot less important than just a second ago, when you were into it. And we can laugh about ourselves. Look at me, I've been pissed off again. And a wonderful field of practice is traffic. Get in your car and start driving around. And notice what your mind is doing. That son of a bitch cut me off. Why doesn't she drive any faster? And so on,
It's
and
like me.
you can see the perfection in it. How? Is it perfect that a woman drives 30 miles in a 55-mile speed zone? No, it's not perfect in itself, but it's perfect for you at that moment, because obviously you need that teaching in patience, in not believing your own story, that you're so damn important that you have to get someplace so quick now. Now, obviously it's not true. Reality is showing you're driving 30 miles an hour. So, great teacher. Reality is such a great teacher, and simple things like traffic are just fantastic. You're in the kitchen and you're burning the food. Great.
Everyday reality.
anything like that. Yeah, everything teaches us. If we're awake enough to even just look for the teachings, we will see them everywhere. And then we peel away these layers of assumed reality of an I that doesn't even exist. And certainly keeps us in stress all the time and out of the heart. So now, when we live in the heart, when we live in this place of peace, we still have an identity. Our identity doesn't disappear, but it becomes refined, it becomes transparent. And when it's necessary to be angry, and it sometimes is, now anger can be a positive force. How? When something in your world needs straightening out, anger gives you that decisive energy that can straighten it out in whatever way. When you are involved in the anger, trouble. It's not what I'm talking about, right? So you have to be empty inside of that anger. But when that anger comes and you are in the heart, there is certainly an appearance of an ego of a person there, right? And it shows up that way to people watching you, but you don't have to be fooled by it. You can know that this is that divine presence that acts through you in this world. And of course, you gotta be very tricky because the ego loves to pretend that and slip right in and say, oh, I'm just angry for his own good. Not too convincing. Right. So it's just a fantastic dance of having this ability to know what is true and who we are become more and more subtle through every experience in the world. And the descending into the heart, the dropping into the heart again and again, every moment you remember during the day and through disciplinary heart-sourcing meditation gets us to the place where we can do it much faster, where we're not so committed, long-term commitment to being yourself, me the jerk, or me the one who's right, or whatever it may be that the coloring of your ego is, because here you're free of it. You just cannot touch that place. And we cannot really contribute what we're truly capable of to this world until we are free of ourselves, free of this illusion of being the big muckety-muck. So this turning into the heart, this way of taking care of yourself, is the service for the world. Let there be no doubt about it. It's not very effective when you go out there to make peace and you're angry about it. It's just not completely genuine. It's a good impulse, but the execution is flawed. Okay. Any other questions? Now let's have a little bit more of a look at what he says about the inner luminosity. Let me start there. So the inner luminosity, these are the two qualities of what you experience when your awareness goes into the heart. Inner luminosity and sorrowless joy. And of course, there are Sanskrit names for those things that have been discussed and explored for literally thousands of years. So this may be brand new in our culture, but it's been explored. There's a science of this, a science that has been cultivated for thousands of years by countless people who got into this, the sages who gave us the understanding of it in the first place. and people who explored it and found it to be true. So, this inner luminosity is in this state, our sense of I amness is fully illuminated by the light of pure consciousness. So this is wisdom. We can see through the illusion of who we think we are. We, the little self, begin to see the special Purusha, our true identity, the self, the divine identity. Whereupon our notion of ourselves as an isolated individual consciousness dissolves. We are filled with the realization that all the subtle impressions of the mind and the roaming tendencies arising from them are fully known to the all-pervading seer. So that space in us that observes, that consciousness that observes, can observe all our latent tendencies and see them as not true. This realization leads to our trustful surrender to our eternal companion. Who's the eternal companion? The self. So you're still you, but you have the self. The self is your true, and then you can say the higher and the lower self in this stage, which eventually dissolves as a distinction. We are naturally inclined to embrace our true essence and turn away from the objective world. This doesn't mean that you're going to become a world denier. It just means that the mind can flow inward and you can explore the richness, and out of that richness then come back to the world. This unique state, which is characterized by inner healing, sorrowless joy, and inner luminosity, dawns on the horizon of our consciousness when we meditate on the lotus of the heart. And then he speaks about this state of sorrowless joy, which is our particular focus here, because that's the bliss aspect, the love aspect of the heart. It is a state in which there is no trace of sorrow and anguish. We are free from doubt, fear, anger, grief, guilt, regret, and shame. We are absolutely certain of who we are and our relationship, both with the higher reality within us and with the external world. The mind is so clear that we see our deeply rooted samskaras, our karmic impressions, without being perturbed by them. Oh yeah, I have this tendency to be angry, to be, I carry this old pain, I have this sense of shame, but we're no longer perturbed by them. So now we can actually become free of them. Because as long as we're perturbed and troubled by them, we still feed them energy. We can distinguish unalloyed consciousness from the consciousness fully entangled with our deeply rooted subtle karmic impressions. We know the truth about ourselves. We are the creator of our personal world. We also know we have the ability to transform and redesign that world. This realization frees us from the fear of losing ourselves by becoming entangled in our personal world. We live in the world while remaining above it. So it's the basis of living in this world in peace. We're no longer troubled by this world. We no longer have this sense that we have to get away from it to find some peace. Now we can get away from it, find a peace, and live with this peace in the world. And in the process of that, profound healing occurs. Whatever it is that we carry, old baggage, old traumas, old confusions, old ways we put ourselves down, old ways of fear. They cannot keep up in the light of this for very long. So, shall we close with a meditation? We talked about it enough. Now we might as well do it. So find a position and a place of comfort within yourself. And breathe into that. And find a peaceful focus in the very center of your chest. And let the mind settle there like you're sitting down in a wonderful seat that's been prepared for you with great care and love. And you completely fit there. So you get to sit like that in your heart. And the breath flows in and out of that space. And then I want you to start your mantra. Pick a mantra if you don't have one. And start your mantra. And it is saying itself in that space of the heart. And if you don't have a mantra, don't worry, just pick one. You can always change it again. Although once you find a mantra that is really good for you, it's great to stay with that. Because you get to experience its power by your own practice of repetition. So experience the mantra repeating itself in the space of the heart and simply see what happens. Let yourself be taken by that mantra. If the mind comes in and takes your attention away, just know that that is to be expected. And as soon as you notice it, just simply bring the attention back to the heart and settle into the heart again. And drink from this limitless fountain of joy. Now, if you have trouble focusing on the heart, you can increase the intensity with which you repeat the mantra. You can actually, in a way, yell it in your mind to keep your attention where you want it to be. And then when the focus becomes aligned, you can relax again. So take a deep breath in, exhale, inhale again. So what you've probably seen now is that there are different energies you experience during a meditation like that. There are moments when the mind is clear and gives away and you can touch on the heart. Hopefully. Sometimes you may have a meditation like this intending that and it's not even happening. It doesn't matter. The effort is cumulative. You cannot do anything with the intention of entering the heart without it not being helpful. But what's in the way, energetically now speaking, are the tamasic and rajasic elements of our mind. Tamasic is dullness, rajasic is distractedness and activity. So you notice when the mind gets dull, it's like the mind turns like mud. You don't see anything. Heart, what are you talking about? Right? And when the mind gets distracted, then it cannot settle down. Or it runs into a certain direction. Oh yeah, this great thought I have to follow now, and so on, you know. And of course, it takes you completely out of the heart at that moment, right? So these are the tamasic and rajasic elements of the mind. And by continuing practice, we purify the mind more and more, so it can actually then gain the capacity to settle in the heart and to stay there increasing amounts of time.
There's a question.
Mm-hmm.
When we practice love, sometimes it can turn into attachments. How can we just love without attachment?
This is a very big question. Who's asking that?
Ravindra.
Say again?
Ravindra.
Ravindra. This is a very big question. In our world, love is combined with attachments and desire almost all the time, but not entirely. So there are moments you might remember when you fall in love. Maybe you fall in love with a potential romantic partner. At that moment, it's not even a romantic partner. At that moment, you're like, the mind is not there interpreting anything. Maybe a baby is born and you hold your son or your daughter the first time in your hands, in your arms. And there is this moment of absolute awe. And the mind is not there. And you're just faced with this absolute miracle of life. And in smaller ways, and maybe not so small ways, it can happen when you look at a sunrise, or you look at a beautiful piece of artwork. Beauty has that effect on us. So in that moment, there's no attachment, there's no desire, and there's no, the other part, fear of losing it. But then the ego mind jumps in and says, I gotta have this. And what does the ego mind actually want? It wants this state, because that's when we feel most alive. But the ego mind cannot really understand that. It is about the personality. It does not know to love. The ego mind wants something. So, to the extent that the ego mind is running the show, we cannot love. And we need to recognize that. We may call all kinds of things love, but when you look at them, they're stressful. And they're stressful when they're attachment, when they're desire. They're tinged by that. But we have the potential, because that love is in all of us, that the purity of that love, but it needs to be honed out, it needs to be distilled out of the life of the mind that always attaches to something. That's our work. So I wish there was a fast and quick answer to that. Oh, do this, 1, 2, 3, and you're done. And you have love pure and no attachments. But that's really the great work of our purification of mind and heart. And in heart sourcing, of course, what today we're talking about this way of going directly into the heart. But the other part of heart sourcing yoga is then the particular skills of clearing away the attachments, the distractedness of mind, the false identification of mind. And it is a extremely sophisticated, useful, practical, down-to-earth way of living. Because with these skills, whatever occurs to you, whatever comes down the pike at you, you can deal with it in such a way that it can be only helpful. Everything turns out to be a teaching delivered to you by the grace of a caring universe. And the heart unfolds itself more and more. So in a sense, our attachments are our teachers. They're teaching us what not to do. They're teaching us by the stress of the attachment. This is also, we're not clear of the stress of the attachment, that the attachment is actually painful. We're so convinced we need to attach. If I don't have that, then I'll be in terrible shape. But it's that attachment that creates the pain. So we need to hone our perceptiveness to see that increasingly clearly. Once we see it, it leaves us. So all of these confusions, for instance, the confusion of love and attachment, they can only last as long as we're too confused to see clearly what's actually going on inside of us. No one hurts themselves on purpose. We only hurt ourselves out of confusion. And we have the goal of enlightenment. We have the three things that we need. The goal of enlightenment, the skills of how to get there, the practices, and the support, the satsang. So we've got it made. We just have to keep on trucking. Keep on putting one foot in front of the next, realizing that we are always exactly where we need to be. Never mind the mind. It tells us all kinds of lies. We're exactly where we need to be, and the situation we're facing is every second of our lives the perfect situation for us. That's the one we need. Why? How do we know that's to be true? There it is. You're in it. And when you realize that, you come to know that the universe has this amazing intelligence that is only there to help you, to liberate you.
In those three components to the goal, where does surrender, how does surrender fits?
The surrender comes, first we have to have a clear idea of the goal. And the goal needs to be something outside of time and space. If it's within time and space, I want $1 million, I want to have my dream partner, but what do we call that? There's a term that everybody's using, it's not coming. The perfect partner. Come on, you know what I'm talking about.
Soulmate.
Soulmate?
Soulmate, yeah, gotta find the soulmate. All of those great goals, get the $1 million, get the soulmate, but those goals are within time and space. They will not set you free because the money and the soulmate comes and goes. And after they go, there you are again, as unenlightened as you were before. So we need to have this ultimate goal. We'll call it enlightenment or whatever you want to call it. We have to have the skills to get there, to move ourselves first through the use of will and through the use of devotion. And when we talk about devotion, there's right there immediately comes the idea of surrender, to recognize higher reality in a being or a path to which we surrender. But the surrender also comes in the paths that are more dominated by will, like for instance the path of yoga, where you get to the point where the mind itself or the consciousness itself realizes that the entity it thought it was does not exist, and you surrender that. You surrender every false idea that you recognize as false, and it sets you free. And then the surrender into the satsang is also just very sweet, because you get to have a family of the spirit. And we need to understand how important that is. That's really the most important component of this. Because if we lose track of the goal, the satsang will remind us. If we don't know what to do, satsang will teach us. But if we have the goal and we have the means, but we don't have the support and the love and the guidance of satsang, we still don't get anywhere. So surrender comes when the time for it comes, and you will always know. But there's a time for you as a being, the way you experience yourself right now, to make an effort. And that effort needs to be sustained. I'll get you to the place of surrender. So this week we have a wonderful visitor coming in a little while. He's a gentleman who is just a wonderful friend. And he was raised in a part of the Himalayas. It's called the Kumon. His name is KK-san. And the Kumon is a region in the Himalayas where for thousands of years the greatest sages have appeared or have taken residence. And Maharaji, my guru, who is the originator of this particular teaching, is one of those great Himalayan sages. And KK was raised as a little boy in this family in this area. And his parents, I think for several generations, had been great devotees of these various sages that appear there. The area is not very large, it's very concentrated, very amazing people living there, just a regular population. And even as a child, these great beings would come in and out of the house. They would stay there for a few nights, they would move around, they have a way of moving around, you know. And so he was raised as a boy at their knee. And then, of course, the greatest of them was Maharaji, and came, and he developed this relationship with him like his son. And he got away with stuff nobody else could get away with. Just like a beloved son can do, you know, he can pull the father's beard, so to speak, and gets away with it. Nobody else would dare do it, you know. And KK was very instrumental in, well, first when Ramdas first came to Maharaji, Maharaji gave him to KK to take care of and to introduce into the richness of this culture. And then later, KK became instrumental in opening the doors to the other Westerners that came to be with Maharaji. So we're looking forward to that visit, and we'll have some, most likely, some video material to share later about that. So thank you for coming. We don't know exactly when the next satsang is going to be, but we'll let you know if you get the newsletter. You will be informed. And I wish you a great and abiding fullness of heart. Namaste.